Hi, my name is Lisa Ahern, and I'm the superintendent of Milton Cemetery, one of the oldest continually used cemeteries in the United States. Here among these stones rest sailors, soldiers, revolutionaries, and pioneers. Some are famous and some are forgotten, but all of them have stories worth telling. Today we'll begin with John Rowe. John Rowe was an 18th century Boston merchant, a man whose name is stitched into the fabric of American history. You can still find it along Boston Harbor, where Rowe's Wharf stands today. But Rowe wasn't just a businessman. He was a smuggler. He was moving cocoa, rum, and other goods through forbidden ports, slipping past British regulations, and like many merchants of his day, he was also involved in the transatlantic slave trade. When Britain imposed new taxes, Rowe's anger flared. He joined the protests against the Stamp Act and helped incite the riot that destroyed the home of Massachusetts Governor Thomas Hutchinson. Legend says that Rowe stood inside the Old South Meeting House on the night of the Boston Tea Party. He was cheering on protesters, but his personal diary claims that he was at home sick. Was that the truth, or was it just an attempt to cover his tracks? Regardless, his ship, called the Eleanor, was among the vessels that was raided that night. Tea from his own cargo was hurled into Boston Harbor. Rowe died in 1787 and was originally buried in the yard of Trinity Church in Boston. But after the Great Boston Fire of 1872 scorched much of the city, his family had his remains moved here to Milton Cemetery. The ashes of Boston gave him a second resting place, one that endures today. John Rowe's story is complicated. His life reminds us that history is rarely clean, and the people who shaped our nation often carry contradictions. In 1915, long before America entered the war, a young woman from Canton answered a call far from home. Her name was Helen Homans. She wasn't a soldier, but her sacrifice was no less profound. Helen traveled to France in 1915, accompanied by her two friends, Edith Parkman and Catherine McLennan. Together, they joined a mobile hospital unit serving the French army, tending to the wounded just behind the front lines. Eventually, Helen was assigned to one of the largest and best-equipped hospitals in the French Army. Just 5 miles behind the Chemin des Dames front. From the hospital grounds, she could see shells bursting on the horizon. Sometimes she and her fellow nurses worked 40 hours straight, operating at night without light to avoid drawing enemy fire. On March 10th, 1918, Helen returned home to Boston and Canton for one final visit. But just 3 months later, she sailed back to France. In late October, as the war neared its end, Helen fell ill. It wasn't enemy fire that struck her down, but influenza. She died on November 6, 1918, just 5 days before the armistice. Shortly before her death, Homans was awarded the Croix de Guerre by the French medical staff. Her coffin plate bore the words, "Mort pour la France," dead for France. Here in Milton Cemetery, Helen Homans rests among those who gave everything. A reminder that service takes many forms and sacrifice knows no borders. Some lives carry the sweep of history, from the boxing gyms of Brockton to the football fields of Brown, to classrooms right down the road in Quincy. This is the story of Lloyd Hill. Born in 1928, Lloyd Hill grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts. As a teenager, he became a sparring partner for none other than Rocky Marciano, Brockton's own heavyweight legend. But Hill's story went beyond the confines of the boxing ring. He was captain of Brockton High School football team, and then he went on to Brown University, where he became an All-American football tackle. He was later inducted into Brown's Athletic Hall of Fame. After graduation, he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But history intervened. He was drafted into the Korean War, where he served with distinction. Though he never made it to the NFL gridiron, Hill's competitive fire persisted. He completed 37 Boston marathons, and he continued competing in the classroom as well, earning a master's in education from Bridgewater State, a law degree from Suffolk University, and teaching as an adjunct professor at Northeastern and Quincy College. For 35 years, Hill served the Quincy community as an administrator, coach, and for 2 decades as principal. In his honor, Quincy High School named the Lloyd Hill Center for Performing Arts, a tribute to a life of service and leadership. When he passed in Milton in 2022 at the age of 94, his story became part of this place. A reminder that greatness isn't only about victories, but about giving back. Some of the people buried here in Milton lived lives stretched far beyond this town. One of them was William Rand, a printer's apprentice from East Milton who helped shape the way Americans see the world. William Rand was born in Quincy in 1828 and grew up in East Milton. As a teenager, he apprenticed at his brother's print shop in Boston. But like many young men of his era, he was drawn west by the promise of adventure. In 1849, during the Gold Rush, he traveled to California. He settled in Los Angeles and he co-founded the city's very first newspaper, but Rand's greatest legacy came later. Moving to Chicago, he partnered with Andrew McNally to open a printing company. And that company, Rand McNally, grew into one of the most iconic map publishers in American history. With the rise of the automobile, Rand McNally became essential. They published the official annual highway guide, mapping America's growing network of roads and guiding millions of travelers through the 20th century. In 1899, after a lifetime of adventure, William Rand returned home to East Milton. He died in 1915, but his maps and his vision of America remain. His legacy still guides us every time we open a map. Here in Milton Cemetery, his stories rest among others that shaped America. Milton's history isn't only measured in centuries-old stones. Some of the people here are part of stories we still remember. One of them is Steve Trapilo, a hometown athlete who lived big, gave back, and left a lasting mark. Steve Trapilo grew up in Boston and attended BC High before going to Boston College, where he played football. In 1987, his talent carried him all the way to the NFL draft, picked up by the New Orleans Saints. Trapilo made an immediate impact and he earned a spot on the NFL All-Rookie team in his first year. He played with the Saints from '87 to 1990 and returned in '92, and later joined the New England Patriots practice squad in 1993. After football, Steve didn't fade from the field. He returned to BC High as a volunteer assistant coach, mentoring the next generation of players. After his playing days, Steve and his wife opened 5 fitness centers under the name 21st Century Family Fitness. He became a Milton resident known not just as an athlete, but as a generous man, a coach, and a pillar of the community. In 2001, Steve was inducted into the BC Varsity Club Hall of Fame, recognition for a career of excellence, but in Milton he is remembered most as a neighbor who gave back. Steve Trapilo's journey spanned NFL stadiums, classrooms, and family gyms. But in the end, it's his generosity and presence in Milton that will endure. Here in Milton Cemetery, his story joins the others that define this community. Sometimes history isn't told through battles or politics, but through food. Here in Milton, one family's bakery supplied crackers that fed sailors, soldiers, even movie sets. This is the story of George Bent. George Bent was the grandson of Josiah Bent, who in 1801 began baking what came to be known as water crackers. Hard, durable, and with a long shelf life, they became essential for long sea voyages. George built the 2.5-story factory at 7 Pleasant Street in Milton, and it still stands today. During the 1860s, the company sold hardtack to Union troops in the Civil War. Those tough crackers sustained soldiers through some of the war's darkest days. In 1898, George Bent joined the newly formed National Biscuit Company that we now know today as Nabisco. But the Milton factory carried on, still serving the community with sandwiches, baked goods, and its signature hardtack crackers. Remarkably, Bent's continued producing hardtack until 2017. By then it was mostly for Civil War reenactors and even some Hollywood movie sets that wanted authenticity. From Civil War camps to Hollywood film sets, George Bent's crackers carried Milton's name far beyond its borders. Here in Milton Cemetery, George rests, but his family's bakery left Milton a legacy that carries on one hard cracker at a time. Not every soldier in Milton Cemetery was a general or a politician. Some were just kids, and they were sent to war with little more than courage and a drum. James Pope was barely more than a boy when he joined the Union Army. He served first as a drummer boy in the 13th Massachusetts Regiment and later in the 123rd. His role wasn't just ceremonial. Drummer boys carried the rhythm of the battlefield, their beats signaling commands to soldiers through smoke and chaos. Pope fought in one of the most defining battles of the Civil War, Gettysburg. But there, he was captured. He would spend 2 long years in Confederate prisons, Libby Prison in Richmond and Belle Isle. For 2 years, Pope endured harsh captivity before finally returning home, and when he did not retreat from life. With his partner, Jacob T. Turner, he co-founded the Pope and Turner Ice Company along the Blue Hills Parkway. Before freezers and refrigeration, ice was big business. In the dead of winter, men carved massive blocks from frozen ponds and stored them in insulated ice houses and sold them year-round. Pope's company produced roughly 1,000 pounds of ice daily. From a teenage drummer boy at Gettysburg to a prisoner of war to a local entrepreneur, James Francis Pope lived a life marked by resilience. Here in Milton Cemetery, his story endures.